And now we will dive into our first session with Ian Monroe, President and Chief Investment Officer at Etho Capital, who brings a practical vision of finance as a force for climate leadership. His expertise lies in spotting high-performing low-carbon companies and transforming data into meaningful strategies for businesses and investors. Today, Ian will explore how aligning with ESG goals reduces climate risk and strengthens competitiveness. He will be in conversation with Chong Kok Wai, a CGM Council member. Please join me in welcoming Ian Monroe and Kok Wai. The floor is yours, Ian and Kok Wai.
Thank you so much, Jatin, and good morning, Ian.
Good morning, and
Morning to you.
afternoon for me as I'm in San Francisco, California on
Yes,
Sunday
good
at the
afternoon.
moment. So you're in the future for me.
Yes. So good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all our global audiences that has joined us. Thank you so much for giving us this opportunity. And so glad to have you, Ian, and nice to meet you. So let me just start by saying that indeed, Gary has actually painted a very grim picture of what we are facing right now. A very emergent of a climate risk that everybody knows, but there's also a lot of geopolitical pushback that we face. But as we move along the way, we know very well that we got to do something. And again and again, the World Economic Forum, through the Global Risk Report, has painted that one of the key risk indicator every year is actually climate risk. And there's no turning back as we push in the effort of decarbonization. And indeed, we are very honored to have you, Ian, to share with us today. I'm sure you have prepared a very wonderful presentation, slides that we can take away today in regards to some of the decarbonization effort, and also some of the things in regards to EVs. I've seen it all, and I believe that we can take away even more. So let me pass this time to you, Ian, to take us on with your presentation. Over to you, Ian.
Thanks so much for the warm welcome, and really a pleasure and an honor to be joining the Climate Governance Malaysia team again. I'm a huge fan of the work the organization does and happy to contribute, and really have been impressed with what's been moving forward in terms of climate action in Malaysia as well. I have a number of slides here that I'll get through pretty quickly, and then hopefully we'll have some good time to return to question and answer for any pieces that are particularly interesting. And as mentioned, I've been wearing a few hats in the climate solution world effectively my whole career. Originally, I come from a science and engineering background connected to climate solutions. I've been teaching climate solution courses, mostly at Stanford University and some other global universities for over a decade. And my main time these days is in the climate investing space. So I think about climate as both a huge problem and many climate risks, but as an investor, there's also tremendous opportunity in this clean economy transition that's going on. And so that's really the opportunity that I think I'd like to be focusing the most on as we talk in this conversation. So one of the things that I guess I've become known for is co-authoring what's become one of the leading global textbooks on solving climate change, called Solving Climate Change, with co-author John Kumi, who's really one of the foremost experts in data center energy use and sustainability, which of course with artificial intelligence is now a very hot topic. And this is the framework that really all governments, all companies, even individual households and individual decision makers can be thinking about in terms of what we need to be doing to solve climate change. In the slides ahead, I'm mostly going to be focusing on 3 of the 8 pillars of decarbonization here: electrify everything, decarbonize electricity, and then the efficiency and optimization pieces as well. But also talk a bit about the non-fossil climate emissions and the carbon removal necessary. And the bigger picture, what Climate Governance Malaysia does, I think, does a lot of great work around aligning incentives and elevating truth about our climate crisis, and importantly, also the truth about the really abundant solutions that are already there and ready to scale up. And of course, as a climate investor, I'm constantly working on the mobilizing money piece, trying to get money out of the pollution problems and into solutions as quickly as possible. So There's what's often called an S-curve of adoption for really any new technology, from roads and bridges and oil pipelines to refrigerators to cell phones and before them landlines. And many of the climate solution technologies, thankfully, have gone from the slow initial start of this S-curve to the exponential ramp-up piece, particularly battery technologies, solar technologies, now electric vehicle technologies. Year after year, we're seeing now new solar additions, EV share of vehicle sales, battery sales, constantly beating the projections from the year before, really showing that we're getting to this exponential S-curve growth trend. And we're seeing this with wind generation, we're seeing this with solar generation, we're seeing this with battery energy storage really around the world. And this is happening because the techno-economics really have gotten to the point that clean economy, climate solution technologies, at least when it comes to clean energy and electrification, they're just to that tipping point where they're the obvious economic solution. And of course, policies can make it more so faster or less so slower, unfortunately, as we're seeing a bit with the policies now with our current government in the United States. But overall, globally, we're continuing to constantly see the generation cost of wind, of solar, of battery production going down and down every year to the point that it now has reached, for electricity production, the levelized cost of electricity equivalent of the fossil options that are out there. And it's actually now getting into the marginal cost of fossil operations, where it's actually cheaper now, in many cases, to shut down an existing coal-fired power plant or even not so efficient natural gas power plant and shift to solar, shift to wind where available, even shift to geothermal where available, and batteries. And the projections are that these clean economy, climate solution technology costs are only going to continue to fall. We're now really seeing amazing things, particularly coming out of China in terms of cost effectiveness of climate solutions. The world's leading battery manufacturer, CATL, out of China, now has sodium-ion batteries that may soon be cheaper than $20 per kilowatt hour of storage, which is just insanely cheap compared to what previously was over $100 per kilowatt hour of storage just a few years ago. And so for these reasons, just the techno-economic momentum, we see solar and batteries really taking over to become the dominant energy source, taking over all sources of fossil fuel production. Already, we're now seeing solar become the #1 source of power production in the world, and we've seen battery energy storage surpass pumped hydro to become the #1 source of energy storage in the world. Electrification for not just vehicles, but also for homes in terms of heat pumps for HVAC systems, heat pumps for heating hot water, electrification even of industry, of cement production, of steel production, even now electrification of aviation. It's not just climate solution technology, it's also an overall efficiency technology. Overall, electrification generally means a much more efficient system than combusting fuel, where most of that energy in the fuel is actually lost to waste heat and not going into something that is useful. When we think about efficiency and optimization, though, and when we think about where is the space for all the renewable energy we want to put around the world, it's also important to think about how we can integrate clean energy with existing systems. As an investor, whenever there's opportunities to integrate clean energy with existing systems without substantially disrupting those existing systems, I think it's a really exciting opportunity. And one of these types of innovations that's out there and has been out there for a while, but it's actually now starting to scale, is on the power production side, agrivoltaics, where we're combining solar with existing agricultural production. And you actually can take an existing herbaceous cropland and convert it to be generating solar that's on par with the solar production you would get if it was just a solar farm, while still maintaining the agricultural yields, and in some cases even improving agricultural yields, because you're actually adding shading and improving temperature characteristics, which increasingly, as temperatures are going up with climate change, we can even think of these agrivoltaic systems as climate mitigation strategies as well as adaptation strategies. Here you're looking at an agrivoltaic system in Japan on the left that has panels that can tilt to let in the appropriate amount of light for rice paddy production underneath. And they're getting the same high quality, high standard rice production that they were expecting, with similar to just a pure solar farm solar production on the same land. We've also seen initial experiments with agrivoltaics in Malaysia, and I've seen estimations that they're actually just on current herbaceous cropland in Malaysia, there's enough potential capacity to generate close to 80% of Malaysia's total electricity demand just by putting agrivoltaic systems on top of existing herbaceous cropland. So this wouldn't include palm oil plantations, for example. It only would be herbaceous cropland like what's there below in the demonstration photo for a passion fruit farm. Another great place to put solar that doesn't disrupt existing systems is on water. So aquavoltaics, aka floating solar, is something that is already starting to scale up a bit in Malaysia with a number of projects on reservoirs. We're seeing it elsewhere around Asia, sometimes paired with aquaculture and fish farming, as in Taiwan. And a great thing about aquavoltaic systems is you can get co-benefits beyond just the power production as well. Actually, having solar panels on water helps keep the solar panels cooler, which makes them more efficient in operations. It also helps keep the body of water they're floating on cooler, which can be better for fish and aquatic ecosystems, particularly those heating up with climate change. And it can provide some other benefits as well. And something that I really love about KL is all the great pedestrian walkways you have around the city. But wouldn't they be even better if you had solar production across the top of them? Building materials now can actually be solar PV panels, because solar PV panels have just gotten so cheap that they themselves can be thought of as a building material, as is the case for the solar walkway in Singapore you see on the left. There's also solar-covered bike paths that are starting to go in around the world. There's one in Korea there that actually produces enough power for 600 homes in Korea. And building integrated solar and bifacial solar that's going on around the world. That's increasingly something that's cost-effective, and solar panels can actually be thought of as just integrated building material structural panels too. I really also get excited about the potential for clean energy to really accelerate rural livelihood improvement. I'm a big fan of the nonprofit Forever Sabah that does work in Sabah on a number of different rural livelihood improvement projects, including clean energy mini grids, where they're combining solar and in some cases micro hydro with battery energy storage in these mini grid systems that are bringing clean power that is actually more reliable and resilient than it would be if you were bringing grid power to these remote areas, and also far cheaper. They're actually bringing power at about half the cost of what it would be if they were bringing grid power from a fossil system. And so there's just all these co-benefits that go on with scaling up these systems appropriately in rural areas, pairing that with rural livelihood improvement and electrification. On the front of electric vehicles, there is a whole lot of misinformation and disinformation that's out there. A lot of that is deliberately manufactured by legacy fossil fuel related interests that don't want to see the electric vehicle transition happen as quickly as possible. But suffice to say, electric vehicles really are better in effectively every meaningful way compared to an internal combustion vehicle. They're cheaper in terms of manufacturing at scale cost. So we're getting to the point now where electric vehicles just have a lower sticker price. If they don't, it's probably because of some policy reason. It's not because of actual techno-economic production reasons. They're way cheaper to fuel, typically 70 to 80% less in terms of overall cost of ownership for driving an electric vehicle versus a fossil fuel vehicle. And it's not just about climate, it's also about reducing localized air pollution. So driving fossil fuel vehicles in most cities, it's the largest source of direct particulate air pollution that's making people sick, and in some cases leading even to respiratory related illness and death. And when you're shifting over to an electric vehicle, you're taking away all that localized air pollution out of the city. And increasingly, as the grid gets cleaner and cleaner, you're taking that out of the system entirely. But even if there's still fossil fuels producing some of the electricity in the grid, it's much more efficient to use that electricity for an electric vehicle than it is to have internal combustion, where you are just losing a whole lot of energy in the combustion process for the engine. Electric vehicles are also a lot quieter. So it's amazing to be in cities that have really gone far down this electrification path. They're just much more silent because you're not only taking out the biggest source of localized air pollution when you go electric, you're also taking out the biggest source of localized noise pollution. And as an EV driver myself, I actually drive a first generation Chevy Bolt, not a super expensive, nice high-end EV. It's almost 10 years old now, and it's still a fantastic car. It has the quietest, smoothest, fastest, most responsive ride of any vehicle that I've ever driven. Range anxiety used to be a problem with first generation electric vehicles. Now they're making electric vehicles that have over 800 kilometers of range. And now we have fast chargers that, on average, new EVs charge up in about 20 minutes. And you've already, if you've gone on a road trip and you've been driving for several hours, you're probably going to want to take a restroom and food break, and that's all you really need. BYD now, the Chinese electric vehicle maker that's one of the leaders, now has fast chargers that are megawatt chargers that can charge up a vehicle in 5 minutes, which is just crazy fast. And there's even some Chinese vehicle makers that have battery swapping, where you can get a whole new battery swapped in, fully charged in just a minute or two. But there's really no reason to wait for any of these next gen technologies, because I'd say the worst electric vehicle on the market right now is still a far better driving experience than the best luxury internal combustion vehicle you can buy at the moment. And there's also a lot of research showing that the biggest factor in whether people decide to go electric is whether they see their friends, their family, their neighbors go electric. So you can think about your own choice to shift to an electric vehicle isn't just about your own choice, but you actually are setting a leading example that creates the social push for others around you in your community to go electric as well. So I guess my question is, if you haven't gone electric yet, what are you waiting for? On a policy level, one of the biggest things that people still do have anxiety about is, where am I going to charge? For most people, if you have home charging, that's just by far the easiest, cheapest option. And you basically never have to go to a fueling station again, because you plug in your car. You don't even have to do it every day. It's maybe a once a week thing. You get fully charged, and it's costing maybe a tenth the cost of what it would cost if you were filling up a tank of gas. If you're going on a road trip, though, you want to have public electric vehicle charging. The recommended ratio of public chargers to electric vehicles is around 1 to 10. And the leading cities around the world in terms of EV adoption, they've been matching that ratio, or the leading Chinese cities are even better. They're about 1 public charger for every 5 or 6 EVs. So you do that 1 to 10 math, and I think it's around 17 million passenger vehicles in Malaysia. That means that Malaysia should be targeting having around 1.7 million public level 2 and level 3 chargers around the country. And of course, we're not there yet, but thinking about where we should be targeting, we're trying to have a lot more public charging infrastructure here in San Francisco as well, for example. So there's a lot that could be done to accelerate EV charging and have policies that make sure that it's just easy and fast and cheap for anybody to charge, whether they have a home where they can charge in a garage, or they're living in an apartment and they have to park on the street and then they can charge somewhere publicly as well. There's a lot of curbside charging around Europe as great models. You're seeing on the right the charging in Paris. Down below, you can see in London, actually one of the neat existing infrastructure conversions they did was taking the street lamps that are all around London and making it so that people can plug in their vehicle into a street lamp and just charge overnight off a street lamp. You're also seeing destination charging locations. You're on the right-hand side, that spaceship-looking building is actually this restaurant that Tesla just opened where you can charge your Tesla and then hang out, watch a drive-in movie if you want, although it's going to charge in 20 minutes, so it doesn't really give you enough time to watch a movie. Stop. There's a fast food restaurant inside as well. Another thing that is starting to be implemented and really can help the overall clean economy ecosystem is making sure that charging is done with smart charging, where electric vehicles, if they're being charged at home, are being charged at times when there's not peak demand on the grid. So if you get home, you plug in, you don't want that charging to happen when there's peak electricity demand and everybody's making dinner, but you want to be charging in the middle of the night, maybe when there's not as much demand on the grid, or at your office in the middle of the day when there's maximum solar production on the grid and not as much demand. We're also now starting to see vehicle to grid technology where it's not just a one-way thing, but the vehicles can actually discharge some of the charge in their batteries during those peak times to help with overall grid stability and reliability. And you can actually have massive additional battery energy storage effectively through all the electric vehicles that are plugged in on a vehicle to grid type context. And another place where really policy intervention is important is heavy duty vehicle charging in terms of large trucks, buses, and there's some good models out there both for heavy duty chargers. You're seeing one charging station there for large trucks in California. And they also have a number of startups now that are starting to do battery swapping for large vehicles. So a large truck comes in and just gets their battery changed for one that's already full, and there's no downtime in terms of the drivers. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but I will just say that it's important to, as a climate investor certainly, but I'd say in terms of policy and time investment as well, really be aware of what climate solutions are not likely to scale. And it's not always obvious when things are at early stage, but I will say pretty confidently that hydrogen for transportation is effectively never going to happen at scale. There's no way it's going to be cost competitive with electrification at this point. And I say this as somebody who actually was an early hydrogen fuel cell investor. My first investment was in the 1990s in a Canadian hydrogen fuel cell company. I used to believe the technology had a future. The more I've seen the techno-economic nuance of why it almost never makes sense, the more I don't think it'll ever go anywhere. Something that's important to remember, hydrogen itself is a really potent greenhouse gas. It's about 33 times worse than CO2 on a 20-year horizon global warming potential. It's also the smallest, leakiest, most corrosive gas in the universe. So it's very hard to store and transport. If you just look at the overall conversion efficiency of a hydrogen fuel cell and the production pathways to get the hydrogen to a hydrogen fuel cell, even if it's clean energy, green hydrogen, it's only about 25 to 35% overall round trip efficient, whereas taking clean energy, put it into an electric vehicle battery, driving, that's about 80 plus, even 90% efficient. And so right there, that's kind of the piece that makes it obvious why hydrogen for transportation, in terms of vehicles at least, will really never work, because you effectively need 2, 3, even 5 times as much if you're burning the hydrogen instead of a fuel cell of clean energy to go the same distance driving. There may be some future for hydrogen in aviation, maybe some green hydrogen in heavy industry, shipping. Potentially there's some other use cases where it may make sense, but for transportation, it's probably never going to work out. Why are we talking about green hydrogen still, mainly because the fossil industry sees hydrogen as a lifeline because you can make hydrogen from any fossil fuel. 99% of the hydrogen out there in the world is coming from fossil fuels right now. It's not coming from clean energy. So you can see there's some vested interest in wanting to keep the hydrogen conversation going. And I won't get that much deeper into it, but the book, The Hype About Hydrogen, that was written by a former Undersecretary of Energy in the United States government, Joe Rahm, it's worth a read if you really want to geek out on the details. Where there is another substantial investment opportunity and where Malaysia also could be a leader is battery production. Of course, now is totally dominated by China, but really needs to diversify more around the world. And it's not just about producing batteries, but now there's so many lithium-ion batteries of different types that reusing those batteries and recycling those batteries is becoming a huge important piece of the clean economy. And where Malaysia could be doing more on battery production, I'd say, is particularly focus on the most advanced LFP, aka lithium ion phosphate battery tech coming out of China. And this new sodium ion battery technology as well is quite exciting. Also, pay attention to what's going on in the battery reuse and recycling space. And I'll get a bit more into it in a bit, but there's a leading company in the US, Redwood Materials, that actually was founded by the original founding CTO of Tesla, JB Straubel, and he's taken a lot of the Tesla team that has been pushed out as Elon Musk has gone crazier and crazier. And a lot of the core founding Tesla engineers are now involved in the battery reuse and recycling company, Redwood Materials. It's by far the dominant leader in the US now and starting to go global. And they're showing that electric vehicle batteries are 95+% fully recyclable, but really you don't actually want to recycle them initially. There's actually a whole lot of usable capacity in most batteries where you can reuse them for grid energy storage for 5, even over 10 years, and then recycle them once they've been depleted enough that they're no longer useful for that purpose as well. So factoring in the recyclability, the cost improvements, the overall techno-economic efficiency, we're really seeing electrification continue to dominate what's going on with our clean energy transition. And it's not just about vehicles. We're also seeing heat pumps ramping up. We're seeing, well, they are vehicles, but you don't think about them as much. Electric trucks ramping up. We're seeing digitally enabled automated devices, different smart devices that are able to respond to what's going on with clean energy production and energy demand ramping up around the world as well. As mentioned, by far the most dominant force has been what's been coming out of China, though it is happening around the world elsewhere as well, but it's just crazy in a good way for climate, how quickly China has been ramping up clean energy and electrification. Because of all the electrification technology that all is available and cost effective, often saving money from day one, we now have cost-effective technology that can eliminate around 75% of current global fossil demand, combining clean energy, electric vehicles, heat pumps on the industrial side and the building side, and other related technologies. And so we're actually starting to see this peak now in demand for fossil fuels. We're seeing a peak in demand for fossil fuels for industry, for buildings, for power and heat, and transportation. I think we're just starting to see that as well, particularly given what's going on with EV scale up. It's also important to remember that electrification doesn't just benefit us when it comes to climate change, but it really benefits us when it comes to direct air pollution. Burning fossil fuels is the largest source of direct air pollution in the world, everywhere. And it also is becoming the largest source of indirect air pollution through climate change and what's going on with wildfires ramping up around the world, including in my backyard here in California. My own family was hit by a huge wildfire in 2017. I've seen my entire community wiped out overnight. And we're seeing this everywhere around the world effectively. But even not looking at wildfires, just looking at what happens when we burn fossil fuels, be it oil, coal, or natural gas, and the direct air pollutants related to that, fossil fuels are killing somewhere around 8 million people from direct air pollution every year. Around 1 in 5 global deaths are connected to air pollution from fossil fuels every year, according to the Harvard School of Public Health. So this isn't some obscure NGO saying that. This is Harvard University Public Health Research. In Malaysia, it's estimated that somewhere around 23,000 people are dying from fossil fuel-related pollution deaths every year. Circling back to wildfires, this is an image from space of the Eden Fire, which took place just a few miles away from my wife's family's home in Los Angeles, California. This was earlier this year. The scale of the fires that are happening now are taking out, block after block of urban areas. These aren't just rural areas that are going up in flames now. Many billions of dollars in disaster damages. And when we think about this for the insurance industry, it's really totally changing the economics, and it's making it so that it's very difficult to get any sort of home insurance now in wildfire areas. We also have research that is actually directly linking climate disasters like heat waves, like wildfires, to specific fossil fuel producers, which is the paper that you can see down there on the right, linking the largest fossil fuel producers specifically to global heat waves, which then are connected to wildfires and just direct deaths from heat as well. And as we're increasingly improving the science to show the liability and the direct connection to fossil production, pollution, and then ultimately climate disasters, that raises some pretty major liability questions and questions around, well, maybe we will really start to have significant pressure put on polluters to pay for the loss of value, the increased insurance premiums, subsidized public insurance plans in places that are already substantially having climate disaster after climate disaster. When we did research for our textbook, we estimated that when you factor in all the social and environmental damages from our current fossil system, not just climate change, but including air pollution as well, our current fossil system globally is costing society somewhere around $22 trillion per year. We're doing some initial updated research right now where we're looking at the actual cost to society of a barrel of oil and a therm of natural gas. And our current initial research, and I'll really frame this as initial, we're still diving deeper into it, is that the cost to society, when you factor in health and environmental impacts, decreased property value, other damages, for every barrel of oil, the cost to society is over $300. And of course, the market price of oil is much less than that. And the main reason we are producing oil is for the profit margin that oil companies are getting, which ranges somewhere in the $5 to $20 per barrel range, typically. So it just brings up this question, are those profits real when we're making $5 to $20 per barrel of oil, but every barrel is actually costing society over $300? Of course, that cost of society is not currently being paid by the companies that are producing that oil, but it does factor into how we should be thinking about overall energy transition as well, and the urgency and really who is benefiting. That's not to say I'm just here to demonize the fossil fuel industry. There's actually some infrastructure and skills in the fossil fuel industry that can be vital for the clean energy, clean economy transition. Fossil fuel infrastructure can actually be repurposed and effectively run in reverse for carbon removal infrastructure. There's a really exciting company based here in San Francisco called Charm Industrial that actually takes waste agricultural residue. They do this mostly with corn stover at the moment, so stalks and cobs from maize production, but they could also do it with, say, waste fruit bunches from the oil palm industry. And they pyrolyze it into what they call a bio-oil that you can see there kind of in the upper left. And that bio-oil then they actually inject underground in unused, depleted oil and gas wells and then cap it off. So they're effectively running a reverse oil process where the plants have done the work of pulling the CO2 out of the air. They're then stabilizing it and getting it injected underground. Similarly, there's companies doing this now with sewage sludge waste that has a lot of challenges in disposal. You can take biosolids from sewage sludge, inject that into fossil infrastructure for permanent carbon removal. Another company called Renewwell that's actually using depleted oil and gas wells for gravity. They have these shafts that are doing gravity energy storage. And there's companies like Fervo that are taking fracking technology from the gas industry and repurposing it for enhanced geothermal systems and making geothermal power production effectively cost-effective in many places where it wasn't before. And we do need to really scale up the carbon removal economy because, frankly, we're already beyond the 1.5 degrees warming limit. And we should be trying to target 0 degrees of warming, which means we need to suck out that pollution that's already up there. There's already 1.6 trillion tons of climate pollution and counting from all of our, particularly fossil fuel combustion over the last century plus. And that's mostly going to stay up there for the next 1,000+ years unless we directly work to pull it out of the atmosphere. To put that in perspective, that 1.6 trillion tons of CO2 pollution is more weight than every living thing on the planet. And it's a lot to remove, but we really need to get to work doing it. And that's where the fossil industry really can be part of the clean economy transition, is helping with the removal phase. Whether the fossil industry wants it or not, the new energy system really is coming. We're starting to get this peak of fossil energy right around now. And in many countries, we're actually seeing the transition already happen, where we're getting less and less fossil use every year. And some have even gotten to effectively 100% clean energy. It's just a matter of how quickly we can accelerate that process everywhere in the world, whether it's in Malaysia, whether it's in my backyard here in San Francisco. We're seeing countries like Norway that I think actually are a great model for places that have fossil production make this clean economy transition, where effectively Norway has used we'll call them profits because of the actual cost of society issues that we talked about earlier, but Norway has used its fossil profits to then fund full electrification, decarbonization of its own economy, to the point that almost every vehicle now in Norway being sold as an electric vehicle. They're even electrifying their construction equipment, their heavy trucks. They have fully climate positive, energy positive buildings. They even have electric ferries and now electric planes that are coming online. And this has been financed by a 78% tax on fossil fuel profits, which actually the UK is now emulating with their North Sea oil production as well. So they're recognizing that there's not going to be a fossil economy for that much longer. They're taking the money they can make from it at the moment and putting it into this full clean energy transition. We're starting to see that happen in a number of places around the world, in Brazil and Colombia, Vietnam. United States obviously has some hiccups with our current governmental system, but actually we're still seeing record solar production and new solar going online and battery energy storage going online, despite what Trump's been saying. And of course, as things get hotter and hotter, there's only going to be more political pressure around the world to ramp up decarbonization. We're seeing more and more net zero targets. We're seeing more and more bans on internal combustion vehicles. We're seeing carbon pricing that's continuing to ramp up around the world and now covering close to, it's actually over 30% now of global emissions, I believe. A huge question, and a question that comes up in pretty much every conversation here in San Francisco, since we're really at the nexus of where companies like OpenAI and Anthropic, other leading AI companies, are based, is what is artificial intelligence mean for climate? There's certainly, I think the short answer is nobody really knows yet. There's a lot of bad that we can see already. There's certainly additional energy demand. There's artificial intelligence that's being used to enhance fossil fuel production and just in general enhancing more consumption, waste, job loss, disinformation, distraction, and conflict. A lot of that revolves around bad business models. We also are seeing good potential, though, where actually there's new monitoring data for climate and other environmental issues and social issues that are empowered by AI. There's new material production. There's new efficiency and time savings. We're seeing AI technologies enable electrification technologies. For example, we see these Waymos, these driverless electric vehicles all over the place now in San Francisco. Actually, if I'm going to take a taxi somewhere, I'm generally taking a driverless vehicle now, where the AI is driving me around in a fully electric vehicle. I just took a walk to the farmer's market with my kids this morning and counted, I think, 35 of them in a few blocks. So they're really just dominant everywhere in the city now. You see driverless electric vehicles taking people around. And that's not great for rideshare driver jobs, but it has really accelerated electrification of the taxi and rideshare market here in San Francisco. Globally, we're actually seeing that most AI data centers have clean energy, particularly solar and batteries connected to them, because that's often the fastest, cheapest source of new energy to get online. And the speed actually matters even more than the cost effectiveness for these AI hyperscalers that are trying to just build as quickly as possible. So when done right, AI can actually support clean energy build out and grid stability. The most exciting AI data center project, and I think certainly the most sustainable in the world that I've seen, and I'd love to see this model replicated everywhere, including in Malaysia, is this project that recently Redwood Materials, the leading battery recycler and now reuser company that I mentioned that was founded by Tesla's CTO and a number of their founding engineering team, they partnered with a leading AI data center company, Crusoe, and they have this 100% clean energy all the time AI data center facility in Nevada, where they're taking reused electric vehicle batteries, using them as the battery storage, energy storage piece of the puzzle, combining that with a solar farm that's right there next to the AI data center. And it's all one integrated system where you have 24/7 clean AI effectively. So I'd say both the most sustainable and probably also the most cost-effective AI data center build out in the world. So when we think about Malaysia in the next decade, I think really the target for Malaysia, the target everywhere, at least the places that aren't there already. Places like Norway effectively are already there, but it's really getting to 100% electrification of both buildings and vehicles as quickly as possible, 100% clean energy with solar and batteries probably being the biggest pieces of that. We're probably, like it or not, going to be pretty close to zero fossil sales, I'd say, within the next decade. I think the end of oil is coming a lot faster than a lot of people project, mainly because of the techno-economic advantages of electric vehicles. And then for agriculture and for forests, certainly conserving and protecting natural ecosystems is essential, but for already disrupted agricultural ecosystems, where possible, agrivoltaics and integrating into the carbon removal economy, I think are really important aspects of what Malaysia should be looking towards, and everywhere that can around the world should be looking towards these things as well. But that's the big high level picture. Actually, where I want to end it is just getting back to your own home. And I'm doing this with my own home as well. Because really climate and health action starts at home. And one of the most important things I think we all should be doing, at least those of us who care about climate solutions and also just localized air pollution, is electrifying our own homes as best we can. And that's not just about getting an electric vehicle and getting solar power and battery backup. It's also about shifting to induction cooking. It's about shifting to electrified heat pump water heating, heat pump HVAC systems, high efficiency heat pump washer and dryers. There's a number of different electrification at home technologies that we can all be doing to effectively get fossil fuels almost entirely out of our lives. And similar to buying an electric vehicle, the more we're all doing this in our own homes and talking to our friends or family, our neighbors about it, the more there's that ripple effect of sustainable economy build out. So that, I'd say, is actually the call to action I'd like to leave us all with, is to look at just our own lives and how we can effectively electrify, shift to clean energy, decarbonize as best we can, and inspire those around us to do the same. Because I think that's something that really does have tremendous ripple effects. And there's a lot of research showing that that's the biggest factor that inspires people to make that sustainability choice. And the great thing about these kind of home electrification pieces as well is it's something that you do it and effectively you're done. It's not like you're constantly remembering to recycle or remembering to turn off the lights. You should certainly do those things too, but these one and done electrification pieces in your life ultimately have much larger ripple effects. So with that, I'm welcoming any questions. You can reach out to me, see more about what we do at the Climate Positive Investing Alliance at positiveclimate.org, Etho Capital at ethocapital.com. Solveclimate.org has more about the textbook. And I'm always open to connecting and sharing insights around climate solution scale up through LinkedIn as well. So there's my contact there. And really, thanks again for having me. Happy to dive into any questions.
Thanks, Ian. Thank you so much. Wow, what a fantastic presentation. I mean, you have answered most of the questions that that I've prepared, in fact, especially on the EV parts. But perhaps in the spirit of the time that we have right now, let's get some questions from the floor. In fact, there were some that has just came in as you were presenting. So let me just pick one or two here. Just give me a minute. So there's a question that asks, what's the latest on circularity opportunities in solar and wind equipment? It says that we don't want to solve one problem, which is climate, of course, and then exacerbate another, which is waste. So are there commercial opportunities, or is this something that we can, solve, especially in the kind of situation that we are in? So what's your take, Ian?
Yeah, so certainly on the solar front, there's a lot of circularity opportunities. There are companies that are doing solar PV recycling. I actually have been an advisor. I'm an advisor to a number of early stage climate solution startup programs, including one run by the French government. And so I've been actually advising a French company that's one of the leading solar PV recycling companies in Europe, and they're exploring other markets as well. So I know that technology is out there. It's definitely starting to scale more. I think the more we have solar around the world and then it reaches the end of its lifetime, whether that's 20 years or 30 years down the road, the more obviously we're going to have a need for recycling and recovering the critical materials there. The short answer is we already can. We have the technology to recover, you never want to say 100%, but call it 90+% of the critical materials that are in those solar panels. And when you think about overall circularity in the clean economy, that's a really cool thing is actually we will need way, way less material than our current fossil system where we're constantly extracting and burning, and a lot of that weight is ultimately going up into the atmosphere. For the clean economy, electrified economy technologies, most of what we can use can constantly be recycled. And so Rocky Mountain Institute, I've seen research that they've done showing that it's less than half of all the material extracted for our current fossil system is what we need for basically all the electrification, clean technology for all time because of that circularity potential with all of it. So 1 year of fossil extraction is way more material extraction than basically forever of clean economy transition. For wind turbines specifically, there is a market for reused wind turbines, and there are efforts to create wind turbine materials that are then more recyclable as well. Certainly steel is something that's super recyclable. So that's a lot of the material. The composites for the blades can be trickier to recycle, but there's some interesting reuse potential for some of them at least as well.
So I guess maybe the next question is what is the cost involved in recycling such, waste that comes out from all this wind turbine and even for solar panels? So that does it really involve a lot of money, which of course brings us to funding in maintaining and also to ensure that the solar panels or even wind turbine are well taken care of, and not cause even more problems to the environment later. How much money that we need?
Yeah, so I'd say it really depends. Circling back to redwood materials, certainly for lithium-ion battery recycling, and they're doing it from the small batteries in your mobile phone to large EV batteries. They find that very cost competitive. They're not getting subsidized to do it. They can make a profit by taking the materials in those batteries and then effectively taking it back to the initial commercial grade raw material that then goes into making new batteries. And they're actually one of the only cathode grade material manufacturers now in the US. But of course, they're getting a whole lot of value as they recently announced with this AI data center of reusing the batteries, particularly the large EV batteries that still have a whole lot of capacity. So in that case, there's no additional cost. It's actually additional savings and benefit for having a really integrated, pretty much fully circular economy around electric vehicle batteries and just batteries more broadly. For solar panels, there can be additional cost. It's still to the point where it's more nascent. It's more getting to scale on the recycling front. And I can't go into details of how competitive exactly it is right now, how much it would need to be subsidized versus just buying cheap solar panels. And of course, the cheaper solar panels get, the harder it is to be cost competitive with recycling, because right now there's just so much cheap solar coming out of China. To a certain extent, I'd say the same with wind as well. There definitely is a reuse market for wind where I think you can get, maybe a 15, 20-year-old wind turbine that's getting decommissioned. Often what happens for wind farms is they're constantly getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So they'll take something that was cost effective and top of the line 20 years ago, but now they'll replace it with something that's 2 or 3 times taller and generating substantially more power. But that small turbine still works just fine with a few mechanical upgrades. And you can then buy that, set it up somewhere else, continue to use it for, maybe even a few more decades. And so that's going on cost competitively. The actual end of life, what happens to those blades on the recycling reusability, I'm not as familiar with that piece specifically. And frankly, I think we're still figuring it out since, there's not that many projects that have really gotten to that kind of disposal recycling phase yet. But ultimately, I'd say we're talking about much less material than in most cases, like we're talking about in terms of relative to municipal solid waste and other sources of waste around the world. But ideally, of course, we want a fully circular economy around that as well. And I've even seen some wooden tower designs now coming out of Scandinavia where they're effectively replacing steel with cross-laminated timber structures to have a more sustainable, even carbon negative wind structure to begin with.
Thanks for the great answers. I think there is no two ways about it, and there's always a cost involved. So it's just how to minimize it. In the spirit of time, let's get one more question. This is a little bit more geopolitical, of course. With the recent, we all know about what Trump has said in the recent event. about a scam, climate change is a scam and all that, being the biggest economy and the leader of the global economy, would you think that there would be some sort of a ripple effect or impact for such a statement being made, especially to the world at large? Or will it slow down any green and decarbonization effort that all of us have been putting in, for the rest of the world? What is your opinion about that?
Yeah, well, Trump in many ways, of course, is very bad for climate action. I would say domestically, although what we saw in his first term that's continuing in his second term now is states like California, where I'm based, and cities like San Francisco, also where I'm based, and even smaller local governments like the rural community where I grew up are doing more to kind of fill the gaps and pushing local climate action where there's the federal government going in the wrong direction. Um, Generally around the world, I'm continuing to see more and more climate solutions scale up again, just because the economics are there, where solar is just saving money, electric vehicles are just saving money. Geopolitically off, obviously, China sees this as a big way to have more soft power influence and connection around the world. And frankly, it's a hard thing to say is a bad thing from a climate perspective. So where the US and Europe are putting up trade barriers and not letting in clean tech from China and from elsewhere with connection to Chinese production, there's just more and more electric vehicles and solar and wind from China and from trade partners going to other countries around Asia, Africa, Latin America. So we're seeing more rapid decarbonization in other places where the US has in some ways gone backwards, but we're still seeing record solar growth in the US, record EV sales in the US. I don't anticipate that there's going to be a huge wholesale reversal. So Trump is certainly not a good thing, but we are seeing some responses geopolitically as well, where elections in Canada and elections in Australia actually went in a much more climate-friendly direction when they originally weren't anticipated to go that way. I think partially as a reaction to Trump's extreme craziness in a number of other areas. I don't want to say that Trump doesn't matter, but I'm seeing some acceleration of climate action, actually, ironically, maybe because of Trump. And when the techno-economics just are really in favor of climate solutions scale up, he is trying to give political favors to his friends in the fossil industry to reverse things as best he can, but he really can't reverse this unstoppable trend at this point. And I'm constantly, I'd say, optimistic based on what I'm seeing elsewhere beyond the headlines of what you see coming out of Trump's mouth.
Absolutely. I'm glad to hear that from you, Ian. So, I mean, that's something that everyone wants to know, actually. Thank you so much. So, in the nick of time, of course, do you have any more things that you can share, perhaps, as a matter of closing to the audiences who have actually had such a wonderful time enjoying the slides? What are your last closing words for everyone to take away?
Yeah, well, I just say that as dire as climate change is as a problem, the good news is we really do have most of the solutions we need. And those solutions are getting better and cheaper pretty much every day. I'd say the closing words I'll return to is beyond the big picture, just focus on your own home and your own community and think about the ripple effects of your own personal choices and sharing what you're doing in terms of your own personal climate actions, because those are the things we have the most control over, right? Regardless of what is going on, for better or for worse, at a national government level, we all can really cost effectively decarbonize our own lives right now. And the more we do that ourselves, the more we're inspiring those around us to do the same. And the more we also understand the challenges that still exist in, say, installing a heat pump in your backyard. And the more we're able to engage on smoothing out those challenges and ensuring that the climate solutions scale up at an individual level is as easy and rewarding as it should be for everyone everywhere. So thanks to all of you that are engaging in climate solutions, and happy to stay in touch and connect. And thanks to the Climate Governance Malaysia team for doing such amazing, inspirational work as well. And I'll also toss out there that if anybody happens to be interested in climate solutions scale up in Japan, I'm helping organize something called the Asia Climate Investing Summit in Tokyo, October 23rd. So if anybody happens to be connecting with climate solutions in Japan, happy to extend an invitation. We have the Japanese Minister of Environment as one of our keynote speakers there.
Thanks, Ian. Thank you so much. Thank you for being with us. And pass this time back to Jatin. Thank you.